Good. Because you gotta rob to get rich in the Reagan era. When this is over with, you can come work for me.
I don't know about you, but I'm ready to kill Nino Brown.
Before Walter White ever cooked a gram of blue meth, before Tony Soprano ever walked into Dr. Melfi's office, before Stringer Bell was teaching macroeconomics to street dealers, there was Nino Brown. A man in a tailored coat, standing in front of cameras telling America's news teams that he was just a businessman responding to demand. A man who could make you laugh, terrify you, charm you, and disgust you, sometimes within the same line of dialogue.
Sit your $5 ass down before I make change.
And the wildest part? He still might be the best villain the 90s ever produced. Because Nino Brown is not a cartoon, and he isn't a mythic Scarface figure carved out of neon excess. He's something much more dangerous. Nino Brown is the nightmare version of the American dream. A CEO with a conscience made of ice, a politician in Armani, a celebrity with a body count. And Wesley Snipes plays him with such precision and intelligence that you almost forget you're not supposed to root for him. At their most basic level, stories are supposed to be simple. Heroes wear white hats, villains wear black ones, and we all know which side we're supposed to cheer for. The good guys save the day, the bad guys get their comeuppance, and moral order is restored. That's just how it's supposed to work. So, why are we so drawn to the bad guys over the good guys? There's something deeply uncomfortable about rooting for the villain. We know we shouldn't, but we do it anyway. We talk about global politics and men's fashion with Hans Gruber. We quote Hannibal Lecter at dinner parties. We secretly admire the swagger of cinematic monsters who should horrify us. Nino Brown takes this moral confusion and turns it into a masterclass in storytelling.
You sounding like this shit is the wheel or something, like it's gonna change the world.
So, let's rewind back to 1991 and talk about how New Jack City didn't just drop a memorable villain into the cultural bloodstream. Quietly created a blueprint that every modern crime antihero has been following ever since. We need to start by remembering what movie villains looked like before Nino Brown. The late 80s produced some bangers, but subtlety was generally not on the menu. If you were a villain in a big studio picture back then, odds were you were either a warlord, a steroidal European terrorist, a corrupt corporate ghoul, or some kind of snarling heavy who existed to give Arnold Schwarzenegger someone to throw off a balcony. Villains back then were usually larger than life, one note, and screamingly obvious. Even when the movies had something to say, like Scarface, the characters still had this mythic, operatic quality to them. You were watching icons, not people. What you almost never got, especially in a mainstream Hollywood picture, was a villain who operated with the grounded realism of an actual entrepreneur.
This is the fruit of our hard work. The belief in the entrepreneurial spirit.
You know it.
The new American dream.
Someone who wasn't just killing people because the script needed bodies, but because he was implementing a business model. Someone charismatic enough that audiences found themselves leaning in, even when everything he was doing was objectively monstrous.
If it's not who he says he is, I'm gonna kill him. Then I'm gonna kill you.
Enter Nino Brown, dressed like he walked out of a GQ photo shoot and into a war zone. What makes Nino Brown so fascinating, what makes him the ancestor of every prestige TV antihero who came after, is that New Jack City treats him like the protagonist of his own movie. And actor Wesley Snipes plays him like a man who absolutely believes he's the protagonist of his own movie. Think of how many scenes in the film belong solely to him. Think about how much of the film is structured around his rise, his ideology, his decision, and his vision. The cops are technically the heroes. Ice-T and Judd Nelson are trying to stop him, but the film doesn't spend nearly as much time exploring them. Nino drives the plot, and Nino commands the frame.
See, that's the difference between you and me. Don't get mad, Tito.
This is exactly what would later define characters like Tony Soprano and Walter White. Not villains on the periphery, but central figures whose flaws and ambitions we follow with queasy fascination. We don't want them to succeed, but we're dying to see what they'll do next. And like those later anti-heroes, Nino comes with his own warped moral code. He talks about systemic racism, economic inequality, and the failure of institutions with the fluency of a political strategist. He genuinely believes that he's not the cause of the destruction around him. He sees himself as a symptom.
Yes, I was a member, but I was forced into this way of life.
It's a self-serving worldview, but it's persuasive enough to make some viewers nod along, even as he floods a community with poison. That's the seductive danger of this character. Snipes understood that for Nino to matter, he had to be magnetic, and that magnetism is what makes him an antihero instead of just a villain. You're horrified, but you're engaged. You recoil, but you also watch him work with this awful admiration. It's the exact same emotional tension that shows like Breaking Bad would later weaponize to enormous success. And all of that would still be theory if Wesley Snipes didn't deliver one of the sharpest, most disciplined performances of the early 90s. Snipes has always been a physical actor, one of the most physically intelligent performers of his era. But New Jack City is a masterclass in restraint. There's not an ounce of wasted motion. He moves like a man who owns every room he walks into, but he never slips into parody. When he smiles, it's calculated. When he loses control, it's surgical. He knows exactly when to raise the temperature and when to drop it to absolute zero. Just as a case in point, look at his eyes in the scene when he stabs Christopher Williams. There's no theatrical rage, no melodramatic villain breakdown, just the cold efficiency of a CEO eliminating a liability. It's a genuinely chilling sequence. This is what separates Nino from the flamboyant crime bosses of the 80s. He's not big, he's precise. He's not chewing scenery, he's controlling it. And then there's his voice, smooth, confident, and polished. Not the voice of a street hustler, but of a man who could host his own talk show, run a political rally, or charm the pants off of a press conference.
You are gonna give up those apartments?
Yes, sir. And you are going to turn over control of the corner.
Nino speaks like someone who expects to be listened to. That alone sets him apart. And maybe the most brilliant part of Snipes' performance is how consistently he plays Nino like a man who wants to be loved. He craves applause, he wants recognition, and he wants to be seen as a visionary.
Nino Brown's a mad scientist, man. What did Marvin say on that album? The boy that made slaves out of men, that's Nino.
That mix of narcissism and insecurity is exactly what will define antiheroes for the next 30 years. He's not just acting cool, he's performing cool. And that's why it works. Then there's the Carter. The Carter is usually described as a crack fortress, but that's underselling it. The Carter is a corporation, a vertically integrated narcotics enterprise. And Nino Brown isn't a kingpin, he's a CEO running a nightmare setup.
One place to make the product, one place to collect our money.
Every move he makes with the building has a corporate logic. He acquires the building, he brings in security, he controls its distribution, and he maximizes profits. This is not traditional movie villain thinking. This is real-world business thinking applied to an illegal market. And that's what makes it so scary.
Gone are the days of selling on the street corners. You change the product, you change the marketing strategy.
In fact, the only thing separating Nino from the CEOs who were lionized in the 1980s, Gordon Gekko types, is that Nino didn't have CNBC to cheer him on. He uses the same long-term thinking of a CEO, the same obsession with growth, the same ruthless willingness to destroy people's lives in exchange for revenue.
If the tenants cooperate, oh, it's lovely. I mean, they become loyal customers. They don't? Fuck it, it's like Beirut. They become live-in hostages.
He just does it with a product you smoke instead of a product you put on Wall Street. Modern anti-heroes like Gus Fring, Stringer Bell, and even Walter White follow this exact template. They run criminal enterprises treated like emerging businesses, filled with positional power, delegation, restructuring, and branding. New Jack City was already doing that in 1991. But Nino isn't just a businessman, he's also a politician, and this is where the film becomes oddly prophetic.
I mean, not one of us in here owns a poppy field. This thing is bigger than Nino Brown. This is big business. This is the American way.
That is pure political theater. It's designed to reframe his crimes as the inevitable product of a failing system. And what's terrifying is that he's so good at it. He understands optics. He speaks the language. Nino understands the public is primed to believe in big, charismatic personalities. He understands that you don't need to be right, you just have to be convincing. Snipes plays Nino like a guy who could run for office if he ever got bored of selling drugs. He has the cadence of a preacher, the posture of a CEO, and the charm of a celebrity host. It's a full-spectrum performance that anticipates the way criminals, politicians, businessmen, and entertainers would eventually blend into a single media-savvy archetype. If Tony Soprano is the old-fashioned mob boss dragged into modern times, Nino Brown is the first villain who fully understood the world as it was becoming. And that brings us to maybe the most underrated aspect of Nino Brown's character. He's a celebrity, a full-on celebrity. Long before viral villains, before criminals had fandoms online, Nino Brown understood the power of spectacle. He dresses the part, he stages his public moments, he performs for cameras as if they're adoring fans. He knows that myth is a weapon. Nino Brown is frightening because he isn't just a criminal, he's an executive with a body count.
You must think I'm a demon, huh?
His business-first philosophy tells you everything you need to know about his worldview. It's always business, never personal.
It's always business, never personal.
This isn't street philosophy, it's MBA thinking applied to crime. When he executes debtors who can't pay, he's not acting out of rage or revenge. He's making a calculated business decision about debt collection and brand management. His crew, the Cash Money Brothers, weren't just a gang, they were a criminal corporation. Nino understood something that legitimate businesses spend millions on consultants to learn. Control every aspect of your supply chain.
Maybe we talking about combinate and consolidate. That's what up.
The film's wedding scene perfectly captures Nino's corporate mindset. When everyone else sees a celebration, he sees a networking opportunity and a chance to display his success. The expensive suits, the champagne, and the lavish party, these aren't just status symbols. They're marketing tools designed to attract talent and intimidate competitors. What makes Nino truly terrifying isn't his violence, it's his vision.
We ain't going out like Pusshead and Blackie lying shot up in the hallway over a $10 bag. You know what I'm saying? We gotta be smarter than that.
This is a man who doesn't think small. When other dealers are fighting over street corners, he's planning market expansion. He talks about taking his operation nationwide and franchising his business model and then building an empire. He uses the language of Wall Street to justify actions that would make mobsters uncomfortable. Even his relationship with his crew follows corporate hierarchy. G Money is his lieutenant, essentially a vice president. Keisha handles security. Kareem manages technology and logistics. Everyone has a role, everyone has responsibilities, and everyone is expendable if they don't deliver results. When G Money starts using the product, Nino doesn't see a friend with an addiction problem. He sees an executive whose judgment is compromised, affecting the bottom line. The Carter is really just a twisted version of the American factory. Workers clock in, perform their tasks, and clock out. There's security and production and management oversight. The only difference is that instead of manufacturing cars or computers, they're processing human misery into profit. Nino has taken the industrial model and applied it to his illegal empire with ruthless efficiency. His courtroom speech at the end reveals the depths of his delusion. He genuinely believes he's no different from any other American entrepreneur.
This thing is bigger than Nino Brown. This is big business. This is the American way.
He's not entirely wrong. He's just saying the quiet part out loud. The tragedy of Snipes' performance is how it reveals the thin line between legitimate success and criminal enterprise. Nino isn't a freak. He's the logical conclusion of a society that rewards ruthlessness and spectacle. The Thanksgiving scene, where he feeds neighborhood kids, underscores the duality perfectly. He's a modern-day Robin Hood with philanthropy as marketing and staged kindness as brand management. We're horrified, but we also understand. We're complicit, and that is why the character and the performance endures. The bloodline from New Jack City forward is obvious. We see it in Stringer Bell's corporate obsession, Avon Barksdale's street charisma, Gus Fring's business discipline, and Walter White's ego and justification. These are all echoes of the same template. A villain you understand too well, a killer who makes compelling arguments, and a monster who never thinks he's the monster. Nino Brown arrives fully formed. And so we come back to the big question. Why is Nino Brown still one of the scariest villains of the 90s? Part of it is the charisma, part of it's the intelligence, but it's also the narcissism, the ambition, and the theatrical confidence. But the real reason, maybe the reason nobody wanted to admit, is that Nino Brown feels real. He is not a supervillain. He's not a horror monster. He's not a slasher in a hockey mask. He's a fully functional human being whose worldview makes horrible sense if you accept his premises. Snipes understood that perfectly. He plays Nino Brown as the logical endpoint of a society that worships money, fame, and force. He plays the character as someone the system created, nurtured, and rewarded. And the scariest part is how easy that is to believe. Nino Brown is terrifying because he's plausible. More than 30 years later, Nino Brown's legacy isn't just cinematic. It's a blueprint, a prophecy, lesson in understanding power, ambition, and human psychology. And that's why he's one of the most enduring villains of the decade. Ready to perform another cinematic postmortem on a cult classic film? Then be sure to check out my video on The Running Man. You'll find a link here on the screen. I'll see you over there.
See ya. And I wouldn't want to be here.